"This table is for whites only." The words cut through the dusty saloon air like a whip crack. But what happened next would shake the very foundations of everything this small Arizona town thought they knew about power, bloodlines, and the woman who had just walked through their doors. The year was 1887, and Tombstone, Arizona was still reeling from the echoes of frontier justice and racial tensions that ran deeper than the copper mines surrounding the town. The Silver Dollar Saloon buzzed with the usual crowd of ranchers, miners, and drifters, all nursing their whiskey and prejudices in equal measure. But when Elena Montoya stepped through those swinging doors, the atmosphere shifted like storm clouds gathering over the desert. Elena wasn't just any Apache woman. Raised between two worlds, she carried herself with a dignity that made some men uncomfortable and others curious. Her long black hair was braided with silver threads, and her dark eyes held secrets that could topple empires. She wore a simple brown dress, dusty from travel, but there was something about her presence that commanded attention without demanding it. The rancher who had shouted those hateful words was Big Jim Morrison, a man whose cattle empire stretched across 3 counties and whose influence reached into the territorial government itself. His face was weathered like old leather, and his prejudices were as deep as the arroyos that scarred the landscape. He stood 6 feet tall, his belly straining against his vest, a man who had never been challenged by anyone he considered beneath him. "You heard me, squaw," Morrison continued, his voice dripping with contempt as Elena approached the only empty table in the establishment. "This ain't no place for your kind. There's a trading post down by the reservation where you belong." The saloon fell silent except for the tick of the grandfather clock in the corner and the distant sound of horses outside. Every eye was on Elena as she paused, her hand resting gently on the back of the wooden chair. She didn't flinch, didn't show fear, didn't even seem surprised by the hostility. Instead, she looked directly at Morrison with those penetrating dark eyes. "I'm not here to cause trouble," Elena said, her English perfect and unaccented, which surprised many in the room. "I'm simply a traveler in need of a meal and information." Morrison laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off the saloon walls. "Information? What could a savage possibly need to know that we'd be willing to share? Get out before I have you thrown out." But Elena didn't move. Instead, she slowly reached into the small leather pouch at her waist. The movement was deliberate, careful, as if she were handling something precious beyond measure. Morrison's hand instinctively moved toward his gun, thinking she might be reaching for a weapon. If you're enjoying this incredible story of hidden royalty and shocking revelations, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell. Drop a comment below with your thoughts and don't forget to click that hype button. It really helps us bring these amazing stories to more people like you. Your support means everything. What Elena pulled from her pouch wasn't a weapon but something far more powerful. It was a necklace, ancient and ornate, with a pendant that caught the lamplight and threw it back in brilliant flashes. The pendant was unlike anything anyone in that saloon had ever seen. Intricate goldwork surrounding a deep blue sapphire, with symbols etched around its border that seemed to dance in the flickering light. But it wasn't just any necklace. As Elena held it up, allowing the light to fully illuminate the pendant, gasps echoed through the room. The symbols weren't Apache, weren't Native American at all. They were European, specifically Spanish royal insignia that any educated person would recognize. The pendant bore the coat of arms of the Spanish crown, but more than that, it bore the personal seal of Spanish nobility. Morrison's face went from red with anger to pale with confusion. What is that supposed to be? Some trinket you stole?" Elena's lips curved into a slight smile, the first emotion she'd shown since entering the saloon. "This, Mr. Morrison, is the seal of the Duchess of Montoya, a title granted by King Philip III of Spain in 1621. It has been passed down through my family for over 250 years. The silence in the room was deafening. Men who had been ready to support Morrison's racist tirade now found themselves staring at what appeared to be genuine Spanish royal regalia. The bartender, an older man named Samuel, who had seen his share of frontier drama, leaned forward, squinting at the pendant. That looks real," Samuel whispered, his voice carrying in the stillness. Elena nodded slowly. "It is real, because I am real. My great-great-grandmother was Duchess Isabella de Montoya. daughter of a Spanish nobleman who came to the New World in the early 1600s. When she fell in love with an Apache chief named Running Bear, she gave up her title, but never gave up her bloodline. I am the direct descendant of Spanish royalty, Mr. Morrison. This necklace is proof of a heritage that predates your family's arrival in this territory by over a century. Morrison stumbled backward, his worldview cracking like dried mud in the desert sun. That's impossible. You're Apache. I am both, Elena said firmly. I am Apache through my great-great-grandfather, a man who led his people with honor and wisdom. And I am Spanish nobility through my great-great-grandmother, a woman who chose love over luxury. I carry both bloodlines with pride, and both have more claim to this land than most people in this room. The implications of Elena's revelation rippled through the saloon like wildfire. If she was telling the truth, and the necklace certainly appeared authentic, then she wasn't just some Apache woman to be dismissed and degraded. She was nobility, with bloodlines that connected her to European royalty and land grants that might predate many of the current territorial claims. Dr. William Hayes, the town's physician and one of the few educated men present, approached slowly. May I examine the pendant, miss? I studied European heraldry during my time at Harvard. Elena handed him the necklace without hesitation. Dr. Hayes pulled out a small magnifying glass and studied the intricate details. His examination took several minutes, during which the entire saloon waited in tense silence. Finally, he looked up, his face grave. Gentlemen, this is authentic. The craftsmanship, the materials, the specific heraldic symbols, they're all consistent with Spanish royal jewelry from the early 17th century. The sapphire alone is worth more than most of us will see in a lifetime. Morrison's face had gone from pale to ashen. The man who had been so confident in his superiority just minutes before now found himself confronting the possibility that he had just insulted someone whose bloodline was far more distinguished than his own. But Elena wasn't finished. She took the necklace back from Dr. Hayes and fastened it around her neck, where it rested like a badge of honor. My family's Spanish land grants cover over 50,000 acres in what is now southern Arizona and northern Mexico. When the United States acquired this territory, those grants were supposed to be honored under the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. But men like you, Mr. Morrison, have spent decades ignoring those legal rights, assuming that anyone with native blood could be pushed aside. The legal implications of Elena's words sent another shockwave through the room. Land grants from the Spanish crown, if legitimate and properly documented, could supersede many of the current property claims in the territory. Morrison's own ranch might be built on land that legally belonged to Elena's family. You're lying, Morrison said, but his voice lacked conviction. Even if that trinket is real, it doesn't prove anything about land grants or legal rights. Elena reached into her leather satchel again, this time pulling out a rolled parchment tied with a faded ribbon. This is a copy of the original land grant, signed by the Viceroy of New Spain in 1623. The original is safely stored in Mexico City, but this copy has been certified by territorial authorities. Would you like Dr. Hayes to examine this as well? Dr. D. Hayes took the document with trembling hands. As he unrolled it, the aged parchment revealed elegant Spanish script and official seals. His eyes widened as he read, This appears to be a legitimate colonial land grant. If this is authentic, it establishes clear legal title to vast territories in this region. Morrison's world was collapsing around him. The woman he had tried to humiliate and dismiss was not only Spanish nobility, but potentially the legal owner of land he had assumed was his by right of conquest and settlement. The racist assumptions that had guided his entire worldview were crumbling like adobe walls in a flash flood. But Elena's story was far from over. As she stood there in the saloon, wearing her ancestral necklace and holding documents that could reshape the entire territorial power structure, she began to tell the tale of her family's incredible journey through history. My great-great-grandmother, Duchess Isabella, arrived in New Spain in 1622, Elena began, her voice carrying the weight of centuries. She was fleeing an arranged marriage to a cruel Spanish duke, seeking freedom in the New World. When her ship was attacked by pirates off the coast of Mexico, she was rescued by Apache warriors led by Running Bear. The saloon patrons leaned in. captivated despite themselves by this tale of adventure and romance that sounded like something from a novel, but was apparently documented history. Running Bear was not just any Apache chief, Elena continued. He was a visionary leader who understood that the Apache people would need to adapt to survive in a changing world. When he fell in love with Isabella, he saw an opportunity to bridge two cultures, to create a legacy that honored both traditions. Elena's eyes grew distant as she recounted the story passed down through generations. Isabella gave up her title and her wealth, but she never gave up her intelligence or her education. She taught Running Bear to read and write Spanish, and he taught her the ways of the Apache. Together they created a family that was truly bicultural, raising children who could move between both worlds. Morrison, still reeling from the shock of Elena's revelations, found his voice. Even if all this is true, what does it matter now? That was over 200 years ago. Elena's gaze sharpened. It matters because my family never abandoned their legal rights. Through wars, territorial changes, and decades of discrimination, we maintained our documentation and our claims. It matters because the land you think you own, Mr. Morrison, was never legally yours to take. The tension in the room was palpable. Other ranchers and businessmen began to shift uncomfortably, realizing that if Elena's claims were legitimate, their own property rights might be in question. The implications extended far beyond one woman's confrontation with a racist rancher. They threatened the entire economic and social structure of the territory. Dr. Hayes, still examining the documents, looked up with a troubled expression. Miss Montoya, if these documents are authentic, and they appear to be, you may have legal claim to some of the most valuable land in the territory. Have you consulted with attorneys about pursuing these claims? Elena nodded slowly. I have. That's why I'm here in Tombstone. I have an appointment tomorrow with Judge Harrison to present my case formally. Tonight I simply wanted a meal and a place to rest before what promises to be a very interesting legal proceeding. The mention of Judge Harrison sent another ripple of concern through the room. Harrison was known as a fair but strict interpreter of territorial law, and if he found Elena's documents compelling, he would have the authority to order significant changes to existing property arrangements. Morrison's face had gone through a spectrum of colors, finally settling on a sickly green. You can't just waltz in here with some old papers and expect to overturn decades of legal settlement. This territory was built by hardworking Americans who took land that wasn't theirs to take. Elena interrupted, her voice still calm but carrying an edge of steel. Mr. Morrison, your ranch sits on what was originally part of the Montoya Grant. According to my family's records, your cattle have been grazing on our land for the past 15 years. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of Morrison's chair scraping against the floor as he sat down heavily, the fight seeming to drain out of him. The man who had been so confident in his racial superiority just an hour before now faced the possibility that he was nothing more than a squatter on land belonging to the woman he had tried to humiliate. But Elena's story had even more shocking revelations to come, and as the evening wore on, the small saloon in Tombstone would become the stage for one of the most dramatic confrontations in territorial history. Elena walked slowly to the table that Morrison had tried to deny her, pulling out the chair with deliberate grace. As she sat down, the necklace caught the lamplight again, its royal symbols seeming to glow with ancient authority. The entire saloon remained frozen, as if everyone understood they were witnessing a moment that would be talked about for generations. There's more to this story, Elena said, her voice carrying clearly through the silent room. More than just land grants and noble bloodlines. You see, my family didn't just preserve documents and jewelry through all these years. We preserved something far more valuable, knowledge. She reached into her satchel once more, this time pulling out a leather-bound journal, its pages yellowed with age but still intact. This is the diary of Duchess Isabella, written in her own hand from 1622 until her death in 1687. It contains detailed maps, trade routes, and most importantly, the location of something that could change the entire economic future of this territory. Dr. Hayes leaned forward, his scholarly curiosity overcoming his shock. What kind of knowledge? Elena opened the journal carefully, revealing pages covered in elegant Spanish script, interspersed with detailed drawings and maps. My great-great-grandmother was not just a noblewoman fleeing an arranged marriage. She was also highly educated, trained in geology and mineralogy by the finest tutors in Spain. When she arrived in the New World, she didn't just fall in love with Running Bear. She fell in love with the land itself. She turned several pages, revealing intricate geological sketches and mineral samples pressed between the pages like dried flowers. Isabella spent decades mapping the mineral wealth of Apache territory. She documented silver deposits, copper veins, and something even more valuable: gold. The word gold sent an electric shock through the room. Every man present knew that gold discoveries had built and destroyed fortunes throughout the West. Morrison's eyes widened despite his earlier humiliation, and even the bartender Samuel stopped polishing glasses to listen intently. Not just any gold, Elena continued, her finger tracing one of Isabella's detailed maps. A massive deposit that Isabella and Running Bear agreed to keep secret, knowing that its discovery would bring an invasion of prospectors that would destroy the Apache way of life. They made a pact. The gold would remain hidden until their descendants could use it to secure their people's future. Elena looked up from the journal, her eyes meeting Morrison's. That time has come. The Apache people have been forced onto reservations, their traditional lands stolen, their children taken to boarding schools to have their culture beaten out of them. My family's gold could fund schools, hospitals, and legal challenges that would restore some measure of justice. Morrison found his voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. You're saying there's a gold mine on my land? Your land? Elena's eyebrow arched. Mr. Morrison, I thought we had established that it's not your land. But yes, according to Isabella's maps and Running Bear's oral traditions passed down through my family, there is indeed a substantial gold deposit within the boundaries of the original Montoya grant. The implications hit Morrison like a physical blow. Not only was his ranch potentially built on stolen land, but that land might contain enough gold to make its rightful owner one of the wealthiest people in the territory. The woman he had tried to humiliate with racist slurs could soon have the economic power to buy and sell men like him. Dr. Hayes studied the maps with growing amazement. These geological surveys are incredibly detailed. Your ancestor was clearly a woman of remarkable intelligence and education. But Miss Montoya, if this gold deposit is real, why reveal it now? Why not simply file your land claims quietly and begin mining operations? Elena closed the journal gently, her expression growing serious. Because, Dr. Hayes, I learned something else from my great-great-grandmother's writings. Isabella wrote extensively about the importance of justice, of using power responsibly. She could have used her noble status to exploit the Apache people, but instead she chose to become one of them. She could have used her knowledge of gold to enrich herself, but instead she chose to protect the land. She stood up, the necklace catching the light once more. I'm not here just to reclaim my family's land or to mine its gold. I'm here to propose something that has never been tried in this territory. A true partnership between cultures, a sharing of resources that benefits everyone. The room buzzed with confused murmurs. This wasn't the direction anyone had expected the confrontation to take. Morrison looked particularly bewildered, still trying to process how quickly his position had shifted from aggressor to potential beneficiary. What kind of partnership? Asked Samuel the bartender, speaking for the first time since Elena had entered. Elena smiled, and for the first time that evening, it was a warm, genuine expression. Isabella's journals don't just contain maps of gold deposits. They contain detailed agricultural surveys, water source locations, and sustainable farming techniques that could transform this entire region. She documented methods of irrigation learned from the Apache, combined with European agricultural knowledge that could make the desert bloom. She gestured toward the window beyond which lay the harsh but beautiful Arizona landscape. This territory doesn't have to be just cattle ranches and mining claims. With the right knowledge and cooperation, it could become a model for how different cultures can work together to build something better than either could achieve alone. Morrison's confusion was evident on his weathered face. Are you offering to share this information, even after what I said to you? Elena's gaze was steady as she looked at the man who had tried to deny her basic human dignity just an hour before. Mr. Morrison, my great-great-grandmother wrote extensively about the destructive power of hatred and the healing power of forgiveness. She believed that understanding between cultures was not just possible but essential for survival. She paused, letting her words sink in. I'm not excusing your behavior or your attitudes, but I'm offering you, and everyone else in this territory, a chance to be part of something larger than individual greed or racial prejudice. Dr. Hayes leaned back in his chair, overwhelmed by the scope of what Elena was proposing. This is extraordinary. You're talking about economic development, cultural preservation, and social justice all at once. But Miss Montoya, surely you understand that there will be resistance. There are powerful interests that profit from the current system. Elena nodded gravely. I understand perfectly, Dr. Hayes. That's why I'm starting here, in this saloon, with this conversation. Change doesn't begin in boardrooms or government offices. It begins when ordinary people decide that the old ways of thinking are no longer acceptable. She looked around the room, making eye contact with each man present. Every person in this room has a choice to make. You can cling to the prejudices and assumptions that have kept this territory divided and struggling, or you can be part of building something new. Morrison shifted uncomfortably in his chair. The transformation in his circumstances was so complete that he seemed to be struggling to understand his new reality. Miss Montoya, I owe you an apology. What I said when you came in, it was wrong. But I don't understand how you can be so forgiving. Elena's expression softened slightly. Mr. Morrison, my Apache grandfather taught me that holding on to anger is like grasping a hot coal. You're the one who gets burned. My Spanish grandmother taught me that nobility isn't about bloodlines or titles. It's about how you treat others, especially those who cannot defend themselves. She sat back down, but this time her posture was relaxed, conversational rather than confrontational. I'm not forgiving you because what you said was acceptable. I'm choosing to move beyond it because staying angry won't help my people, won't develop this land, and won't honor the legacy my ancestors left me. The wisdom in her words seemed to resonate through the room. These were men accustomed to settling disputes with violence or legal battles, not with forgiveness and partnership. Elena's approach was as foreign to them as her dual heritage, but it was also strangely compelling. Samuel the bartender finally spoke up again. Miss, what you're proposing sounds almost too good to be true. But let's say some of us wanted to be part of this partnership you're talking about. What would that actually look like? Elena opened Isabella's journal again, turning to a section filled with detailed drawings and calculations. It would start with education. Isabella documented sustainable farming techniques that could increase crop yields while preserving soil quality. She mapped water sources that could support much larger populations if properly managed. She even designed architectural plans for buildings that could withstand desert conditions while remaining comfortable year-round. She traced her finger along one of the detailed drawings. But more than that, it would mean recognizing that Apache knowledge and Spanish knowledge and American innovation could combine to create something unprecedented. Imagine ranches that work with the natural ecosystem instead of fighting it. Imagine towns that are built to last centuries, not just decades. Imagine an economy based on sustainable prosperity, rather than boom and bust cycles. Dr. Hayes was studying the journal pages with growing excitement. These agricultural techniques, they're remarkably advanced. Your ancestor was clearly decades ahead of her time in understanding soil science and water conservation. She had excellent teachers, Elena replied. The Apache people had been successfully farming this land for centuries before Europeans arrived. Isabella was wise enough to learn from them rather than trying to impose foreign methods on a landscape she didn't understand. Morrison was listening intently now, his earlier hostility replaced by something that might have been hope. Miss Montoya, if what you're saying is true, if these methods could really improve ranch productivity, I'd be willing to listen, to learn. Elena studied his face carefully, looking for signs of sincerity. Mr. Morrison, learning would require admitting that you don't know everything about this land. It would require acknowledging that the Apache people you've dismissed as savages actually have sophisticated knowledge that could benefit you. Are you prepared for that kind of humility? Morrison was quiet for a long moment, wrestling with concepts that challenged everything he had believed about racial superiority and cultural hierarchy. Finally, he nodded slowly. I reckon I am. I've been ranching this land for 15 years and I've lost more cattle to drought and disease than I care to count. If there are better ways to work with this country instead of fighting it, I need to know them. Elena smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. That's the beginning of wisdom, Mr. Morrison. Isabella wrote that the land doesn't belong to us. We belong to the land. When we start thinking that way, everything changes. She closed the journal and looked around the room one more time. Gentlemen, tomorrow I will present my case to Judge Harrison. I will establish my legal right to the Montoya lands, and I will begin the process of developing them according to my ancestors' vision. But I hope that won't be the end of our conversation. Elena stood up, fastening her satchel and adjusting the royal necklace that had started this entire confrontation. I'll be staying at the Grand Hotel tonight. Anyone who wants to discuss partnership opportunities, sustainable development, or simply learn more about what my family's knowledge could mean for this territory is welcome to call on me. She paused at the door, looking back at Morrison one last time. Mr. Morrison, you asked me earlier what a savage could possibly need to know that you'd be willing to share. I think we've established that the question should be reversed. The real question is, what can you learn from someone whose ancestors understood this land long before yours arrived? With that, Elena pushed through the swinging doors and disappeared into the Arizona night, leaving behind a saloon full of men whose worldview had been fundamentally shaken. The woman they had expected to dismiss and humiliate had instead revealed herself to be nobility, a landowner, a keeper of ancient knowledge, and a visionary for the future. Morrison sat in stunned silence, staring at the table where Elena had sat. The same table he had tried to deny her access to was now the place where his entire understanding of power, race, and justice had been overturned. The necklace's royal symbols had been just the beginning. Elena Montoya had revealed herself to be far more than anyone in that room could have imagined. As the men slowly began to talk among themselves, processing what they had witnessed, one thing was clear. Tomorrow's legal proceedings would be just the beginning of changes that would transform not just individual lives, but the entire character of the Arizona territory. Elena Montoya had come to reclaim her heritage, but she had offered something far more valuable, a vision of what the American West could become when cultures worked together instead of against each other. The royal symbol on her necklace had been proof of her bloodline, but her words and actions had proven something even more important, that true nobility comes not from titles or ancestry, but from the courage to stand up for justice, and the wisdom to build bridges instead of walls. Hey my friends, help me by subscribing to the channel so we can reach 1,000 subscribers, even if you're watching from your TV or computer. Your subscription makes all the difference, and the algorithm will help you see more amazing stories. Leave a like or an emoji in the comments and be part of this growth.